I think in the late 80s was like a semi-pop station. And the beat didn't take on its persona until Keith Nathley became program director, who came down from San Francisco and brought most of his DJs down to the beat, and they started calling it True to the Street. So instead of being an urban contemporary, which they called a lot of stations, it became more of a rap and hip hop station, which at that time they let everybody go. Uh, Whole new staff, but for some reason, I found out later, they kept me. And they said that I probably would not keep my job because they were a rap and hip hop station. I said, okay. And they said, we're doing that because we trust you. We know your reputation. You're not going to badmouth the station on your way out, but you're probably not going to have a job here. So
Wow.
I said, okay. And that continued for a while, even when they had the first meeting, when they became the true beat. By the way, that's the first beat station in the United States. Then beat stations, cropped up all over the world. And the program director did not invite me to the meeting because he said, you're not going to be here probably. But somehow a week went by, 2 weeks went by. I go by Keith's office. He goes, I don't have an answer for you yet, but you're still here. So maybe like a month later, I walk by his office. He called me in. I go, this is it. When you're called into the office and sit down, I go like, this is the end. He goes, I don't know what you do, but I like it. So I'm going to make your show a feature show. So they kept my show. And it was one day a week. Then Eazy E, who was working at the beat with the Ruthless Radio Show, went to Keith and said, because Eazy E was notoriously really involved in the community. He knew the people, he knew the streets. And he said, you need Kevin on the radio more. So ostensibly, Eazy E extended my career, and I'm still here. But it was really Eazy E that kept it going because there was no other station back then that I could have worked for in LA, and they gave me, uh, carte blanche to go anywhere to try and get a job, but there was no other place that fit my style or I fit their style. And then I stayed at the beat.
Could you elaborate on Easy E a little bit with us? What was it like? What was a couple conversations that stood out to you with him?
He had a office at the beat. We used to be in Hollywood on Yucca Street, and a quaint little building. I loved it there. It was in the middle of a drug-infested neighborhood. Like I just like being a part of a neighborhood is basically part of your listening audience. Later on, they moved to Beverly Hills. I didn't feel comfortable because I go, that's not you can't look out the window and see your audience in Beverly Hills, But so well, I'm going to back the story up a little bit. I moved to Los Angeles in 1990. The day before I moved, I was watching TV. One of those nighttime news shows might have been Ted Koppel, Nightline, whatever it was. They were interviewing Eazy E. I was amazed at what I saw on my TV and what I heard. NWA, cop killers, and all of that. I'm going, who is this idiot? I said, I don't like this guy. So I moved to Los Angeles. I quit radio. I came to do voiceover work in Los Angeles. So I'll cut that story short, but I ended up on the radio at the beat. If maybe another time, or if our conversation works to that, I could say how that happened, how I ended up at the beat. And first time I met him, I said, E, I got to tell you a story. And I told him what I just told you. I didn't like you. You know, talking about killing cops. Blah, 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 blah. I said, but you see, when I came to LA, then I realized this is a whole different backdrop. You know, be careful wearing blue or red. You know, it was pretty tough back in those days. You know, because you had your Bloods and your Crips. And I told him, I said, I learned LA. I took my time to find out what the fabric of Los Angeles was, especially the street part. And I told him, I said, I didn't like you. And I said, here I am. He said, I can't believe you're telling me that story. I said, I'm telling you that story because many times, and in this case, first impressions are wrong. I could not have been more wrong, but I was based on some kind of emotion watching TV. You're just the opposite. You're great. And he had an office there, and we would talk, and he was very open. He goes, Kevin, you know how I make all the money? Why other rappers and people don't like me? I said, I don't know why that is. He said, because I learned that, you know, it wasn't the jewelry, the cars, and the houses that are thrown at you. He said, that's just to lure you in. You know, at the end of the day, those things will go away. He said, I learned about writing and publishing, owning the rights to music. And he was on that tip. He goes, so that's why, hey, I make a lot of money, and that's why I'm so disliked. But we had talks like that. He actually said to me one day, can you record a drop for me? You know, Eazy does it. Da, da, da. I went home and I did it and I took it to him. But that was too little, too late. You know, he passed away. And it was so sudden how he passed away from his disease. You know, I just like, he looked 100% healthy to me. I didn't see any signs of deterioration. But I'd have to ask some of the people back then if what I did made it on to any of his albums. I don't know. But I went home and recorded on a digital audio tape and I took it to him. But we had those conversations that were near and dear to me because the fact that he would walk in to the program director's office and said, I'm part of the streets. I know what's going on. People want to hear this guy. So once again, he saved my career.